I'm just playing around, Pete.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Murphy, and welcome to Murf+E Unfiltered Zero BS Biz Talk. I'm here today with my co-host, Eliot Grossman. How are you, Eliot?
I am doing great, Murph. How you doing?
Good. Nice to see you again.
It's great to see you, too.
Thank you. Thank you. So when I was preparing for this particular show, as you know, I always like to try to pick a topic that we can both equally relate to.
Sure.
And so I was really pleased to hear that as you were prepping for this show, you said, oh my gosh, this is a really wonderful topic, especially for someone that's in the sales world, if you will. And I thought to myself, well, that's really good to hear, because I feel as if this topic, which is called preparing for what's next, really can apply to just about anybody. And it's really about potentially having what maybe not a word that everybody likes to hear about, but a contingency plan. And so we're gonna be diving into that a little bit. But let me just set this up with preparing people for what the overview of this is all about, and then we'll go from there. So, do you have a what's next mentality? Not everyone does, as some people are quite good at living in the moment. The reality is that we need to be better at doing both, living in the moment while preparing for what we have to contend with in terms of handling the unexpected. So for me personally, I will readily admit that I'm not necessarily good at living in the moment. This is something I challenge myself with all the time. You hear and you read about things saying you should really try to live in the moment, and I do my best, but I can tell you that I'm not there yet, but I do work at it. The other thing that I asked in the setup of this is, do you have a what's next mentality? And what I mean by that is, are you the kind of person that will think about preparing for having a plan B or plan C in place, just because we know that not everything goes perfect in everybody's life, certainly not. And I don't know about you, Eliot, but I don't have a crystal ball, even though I would like to. And sometimes, having a crystal ball may not be the best thing. But in terms of having a what's next mentality, I think that one of the things that I'm always talking to my clients about is making sure that they have a what's next mentality. And as we've sort of, I've set this up, and we'll talk about this together, having plans in terms of what you're going to do in the event that something doesn't go the way that you want it to. So would you say that you have a what's next mentality?
I think so go back to what you were saying before. Forget it, I'll answer it this way.
Okay.
A what's next mentality is super important in the sales world. And it's a learned behavior. I guess it's a term I'd probably use, because you don't ever know about these things until you get caught up.
Sure.
And you get asked questions you used preparing earlier that you're not prepped for.
That's right.
And then you have to start dancing. And when you start dancing and start BSing, customers can see right through it. Clients can see right through it.
Absolutely.
So I would say now, I absolutely have a what's next mentality. But you learn the hard way. You do.
And so in terms of having a plan in place, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, so it's all about being prepared, right? So you learn, you have to think, and at times I try to put myself in the customer's shoes, put myself in the client, who I'm going to meet with, what I'm going to talk to them about, what am I going to pitch them, and what would the questions be that if I'm, in their shoes, what am I going to ask? What's interesting to me?
Anticipatory.
Of course.
Right.
If I know what the industry is, I need to be able to anticipate, get ahead of the curve, so that I have a full understanding of what they're going to ask. It's not like, oh God, let me see. Boy, that's a good question.
And essentially,
and I'll be able to rattle it off.
Mitigating the risks, right? Because you know that when you don't have any contingency plans in place, or preparing for what's next, you can get yourself into a whole lot of trouble, and nobody wants to be there.
Yeah,
we've all been there, I guarantee
absolutely. So
right?
when you lower the risk, right, certainly, I know in your side of the thing, in the marketing world, marketing folks are making us sales folks look better. But when we lower our risk, it makes us look a whole lot more smarter. We're prepared. we're well versed in what we're doing and where we're at, and we have a much better chance of obviously moving to the next step and or closing the deal.
Exactly. So do you have a recent story in terms of when you had to put this what's next plan into action?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Actually, this week, so we have a brand new product. My company has a brand new product on the market. It's revolutionary in the industry. No one has a product like this. There's nothing like this out there, and I'm sure there will be soon enough because of the success that we've having in the South, Midwest, and across the West. We're able to just roll it out here due to the weather in the Northeast. But people that I've met with already, that I've already showed pictures, videos, et cetera, sent information, said, no way, there's no way this is possible, can't happen, no way to do it. But I knew those questions were going to come up.
Sure.
So with that, I got videos from my folks out west, videos from my folks out south, down south. I had answers to the questions that, what did they face? What were the problems they were facing? And got a few phone numbers for customers now that were using the product in the West Coast and said, let's call them right now. They are willing to talk to us because they're so shocked that the product is doing it. So talk to me about, and I know you do this and I made a note of this, if you've coached or worked with anyone who didn't have a what's next plan, because I know, I wish somebody had coached or told me that when I was in my younger sales days.
Absolutely. So this is something that I do on a regular basis, and there is a particular client that comes to my mind that was in the technology space that didn't have a what's next plan, even though they were failing to meet their number on a consistent basis. Mm-hmm. So I got brought in to work with them in terms of taking a look at, okay, what's going on here? And one of the first things that was so obvious to me was the fact that they just kept doing the same thing, expecting different results, and we know what that means. It's the definition of insanity, right? And so I thought, okay, well, we need to sit down and start talking about a what's next plan. We need to put a contingency plan in place because what you're doing is not working. Mm-hmm. And the shocking thing was that they really hadn't considered this as a possibility. They just kept hoping for the best. And they really didn't even know where to start in terms of how to put this plan together in the event that next month they weren't going to hit their numbers again, which it was looking like that wasn't going to be the case for them. Mm-hmm. So I basically sat down with them and gave them instructions in terms of how to go about doing this particular task of putting this contingency plan into action. And shockingly, it worked.
Wow, what a surprise.
I know, exactly. And it was really a lot of fun in doing so. There was another team that I worked with that was a sports team, and they basically had a similar challenge in front of them, which was that they expected to have a winning season because no one shows up and says, let's
lose all
today.
The games.
It doesn't happen.
That's a lot of fun. Let's lose.
Exactly. That's why I really like working with sports teams, because everyone has the same goal. I
can't wait to practice all week and then
lose.
Yeah, it'll be great to practice and lose.
Right, exactly. So this particular sports team, of course, they had in mind that they were going to win every single game, that every single game was going to be a layup, and they were going to be superstars and make it to the state championship with great ease. And of course that didn't happen. So I talked to them about the what ifs in terms of the scenario planning for, all right, well, if in fact, let's just say halfway through a particular game, you're behind, what are we going to do? What are some of the strategies that we can apply to potentially help us to get to a better place, to set us up to win this game, right? And they hadn't even considered that at all. And so it was really fun because we got everybody involved, including the coach, of course. But so everybody had input in terms of providing suggestions in terms of what could be done to have this plan in place, which was a ton of fun. And the thing that oftentimes is a perception that I like to try to correct with people and teams that I'm working with is that there's this perception that change and having maybe sometimes a plan in place can be a negative thing, and when in fact it's just the opposite. And when you experience change and when you at least give a change a try, the results can be really impressive and quite amazing.
Well, sure, Murph. So you talk about a sports team, right?
Yes.
And some of the best, and they talk about Belichick or other coaches in various sports. You have to be able to make mid-game adjustments.
Absolutely.
Based off of what the other team is doing. Well, it's
That's
no
right.
different in my world or in your world. When we come back after a meeting and say, customers or clients aren't really looking at the marketing material the way that maybe we saw it back at corporate.
Right.
Now they're looking at it differently, and they gave us these suggestions. Then you can make adjustments on the marketing side. For us, we're stuck between
That's right.
a rock and a hard place
Right.
when we need to make adjustments
Maybe on the fly.
mid-presentation type of thing. And if we're not prepared for that, if we're not prepped to make these changes, you get one chance. For the most part in the sales world, you get a meeting, 2 meetings,
Right.
but you get one chance to make your presentation.
That's right, because you lose your credibility.
Yeah, of course. And if you don't know what you're talking about, if you don't look prepared, if as a company you're not ready, they just basically tell you to, beat it, hit the road. Thanks, but no thanks.
Exactly. So one of the things that I always encourage people to do also is to approach having a contingency plan with the mindset that it's going to work out. But if it doesn't, you've got some sort of methods in place in terms of what you can do to make the situation a lot more palatable for everybody involved in
Sure.
the situation. Because when things go wrong, it tends to impact just about everybody in some way, and nobody wants to be in that situation. So I have some tips that I'd like to share.
I know you do.
As you know, I like to
I know.
provide people with tangible things that they can benefit from.
Absolutely.
And this case, in this case for this particular topic is no exception. So the first one is to start out, I talked a little bit earlier in terms of what I do when I go in to work with teams in terms of how to set them up, especially when they don't know how to go about doing this method of putting these contingency plans of what's next in place. The first thing that they do is to make a list of the positive outcomes that they expect. So start with a positive mindset because, I think it's a much healthier place to begin. And then use your positive team outcome list and then make a second column of information. And then include a couple of reasons in that column next to each of those different points in terms of why that might not work out. So you start with a positive, and then you talk about in this middle column why it might not work out. And then create a third column. And in that third column, you're going to propose a solution if in the event that the first thing doesn't work out.
Right.
And what is really important is to potentially, consider thinking about having more than one person involved in this contingency planning. This isn't just one person sitting down necessarily, although it could be. There are instances where it is appropriate. If you're, say, an individual contributor on a team, you can do the same thing for yourself. And have you ever had to do something like this?
Yeah, so because you are very organized, and most folks on your side of the business are very organized, a lot of folks, even the A players in my side of the world, in the sales world, we fly by the seat of our pants, right? We like to think
Really?
it's fun to be able to dance. Let's dance. And
You're telling me this
yeah,
now?
wow, how did you do it, right? And so I've said this so many episodes we've done, plan your work and work your plan.
Yes.
And so when you've got that plan in place to be able to work, I talked about putting myself, in their shoes. I tend to, even though I'm extremely positive and I feel actually walking in, I'm going to close every deal
Good.
out there, right? Because,
Good.
we salespeople have huge egos and attitudes and we think we're the best.
Another shocking revelation.
Yeah, but you got to prep now, right? I used to
right.
think just
That's right.
not being prepped, hey, it's a great
Sure.
guy and let's dance. Not the case.
Right.
So now I prep, I'm ready, I don't dance anymore. But now I look at the negative side of things. What are they going to say? How do I react if they say that doesn't make sense? How do I react and say, well, we don't do it that way, and we've been in this business for 100 years, and we're going to continue to do it that way? And to be able to think a little bit outside and continue to not look in the mirror so much at yourself, but look at what they are, how they're going to look at your product, how they're going to react to what you're potentially pitching, is really a good way to do it. And maybe 2 or 3 days in advance would help. Right.
Wow, I love that.
Not
I
2
love
or
hearing
3
that. Minutes?
hours, minutes. Yeah. Right.
I've seen that in action. So,
yeah, like
I
sound like I prepped for the show today, right?
Precisely.
Sure.
Exactly. Right. Well, I have some other tips, and I alluded to this and mentioned this slightly in the first 4 tips. But the thing I want to emphasize for this next tip is that it is really recommended that you, in the spirit of inclusion, have as many people on your team involved in the contingency planning. That's really important. And one of the reasons for doing so is to make sure that people are aware that you have this in place in the event that something goes wrong, because at least it'll give them a sense of comfort and not have everybody go into a panic thinking, oh my gosh, there's a problem here. What are we going to do? There's nothing worse when you feel like the leadership team doesn't have a plan in place and everybody goes into panic and rumor mode. I mean, we've both been there. It's a terrible place to be. We don't ever want to repeat that. But it's realistic that it's probably going to happen again somewhere for somebody out there. But there are certainly things that we're talking about today that can help to mitigate that from happening. And then, it's really important to have the process of putting it together sort of be a fluid process. It shouldn't necessarily be one and done. You can kind of, get it started. You don't have to come up with every single contingency plan imaginable or point that you've got to address in the course of the time that you've allocated to do this. You can do this over the course of, let's say, a week, maybe a couple of weeks, and maybe you need to do it every quarter. It could be that it's the type of situation where you're continuously going to have to refine this. Hopefully not, but there are going to be instances where it will be appropriate to refine this contingency plan on a regular basis. And then the last thing I want to point out is that mindset plays a really large role in terms of going into the process of putting these contingency plans together. So I talked about coming in with a mindset of being positive, but then weirdly, the middle part is thinking about, okay, what could potentially go wrong? Because you have to balance that out. But then it then further balances things out by having a solution. So you've got the what could go right, what could go wrong, and then come up with a solution.
Yeah, so let me talk about that. So you talked about the positive, you talk about the middle or the negative part, and the solution.
Yes.
So what I found as I've kind of gone through the years, and we tried to prepare a little bit better than we would when we were younger, I guess. Try to get your pitch ready and in place, your presentation ready, and pitch. Do your pitch with your team, or do your pitch with 5 people throughout the company.
That's ideal.
That don't really know you.
That's even
or don't
better.
really know what you're doing, but give them a little heads up a day in advance. I'm going to ask you to be in here.
I love
this
that.
is what I'm going to do.
Yes.
When you're able to do that, and you want them to shoot holes in your presentation.
You do.
You want them to ask questions.
Right.
And whether you can answer those questions at that time or not, these are people that, intelligent folks that might be able to then say, okay, wow, I got to work on that, I got to work on that, got to work on that. So that when you actually get in front of the client you're going to pitch the next day or a few days later, you're far more prepared than you were, prior to.
Exactly. So one of the things that doing and having this method in place of having these contingency plans is that you're going to be addressing something that no company or person is immune to, and that's adversity. And so whenever you're having a plan in place to conquer or to address adversity, it's going to put, as I said earlier, people at ease. And there's nothing worse than feeling, and we've both been there, when you feel, oh my gosh, I can't believe no one had a plan for this situation.
So how do you, and I know you're working with sports teams, I know you're working with large organizations,
and
I've thought about this. Yeah, and I've thought about this, right? And how we dealt with it. I used to coach college basketball. How I dealt with it when I coached, my 8th grade girls team. How I dealt with it. How do you, it's really not much different how you deal with adversity. So how are you dealing with the individuals, the teams, et cetera?
Sure. So when I'm dealing with the individuals, what I typically will ask them is to come up with a list, as you know I love lists, in terms of the things that may be causing them angst. Mm-hmm. And when somebody commits to putting something like that down on paper, and then you address it, you look at it, it actually becomes a lot less threatening, particularly when you talk to somebody about coming up with a plan in terms of, okay, so what's the worst thing that could happen in each of these situations? You're telling me that A, B, and C, these are just like terrible things that you're concerned about that's causing you anxiety as an individual. Are there things that we can do to make the adversity or the anxiety less?
Sure.
And yes, the answer is always yes. And so you can apply that same thing to a team, whether it's a workforce team or a sports team. And as I said earlier, it's really important to involve everybody in this because everybody has tremendous ideas. And typically, you're surprised at the amount of different solutions people could come up with. Mm-hmm. Because let's face it, nobody wants to be facing adversity. It's probably one of the most uncomfortable places to be. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can generally always have some kind of a plan in place, even a plan that's fairly all-encompassing. So you may not even be able to fully anticipate everything because, let's face it, we talked about the fact that I don't have a crystal ball, I don't think you do. So things are bound to happen. Things are bound to go wrong. And Benjamin Franklin has a saying, those who fail to plan to fail, right? So are you setting yourself up for that self-fulfilling prophecy? I hope not, right? And that's what we're talking about today is making sure that you're not doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're 1,000% right. Long time ago, when I did coach college basketball, I was responsible for going to scout the opposing teams. Mm-hmm. And real quick, it was, I'd go back, scout the team, write up a scouting report, and then lay it out for the team. And it gave me an idea back then of exactly how well it was to prepare, or how important it was, rather, to prepare.
Right.
Because I was then be able to get these women ready to prepare for the game of a team they've never seen before.
That's right.
And it just, you talked about a team.
Yes.
Well, that's the perfect example that I learned when I was much younger.
Right.
That I was able to help somebody prepare. And we've talked about that, overcoming adversity or being prepared and the angst of the unknown, right?
Exactly.
We all have the fear of the unknown, but
that's true. So recently I was talking to a small business and I was talking to the leader of this organization, and they were a perfect example of a company that could take advantage of what we're talking about today. They have infighting going on. They have people that don't have well-defined roles. They're playing the blame game. It's really ugly in terms of what's happening there. Now, none of this has to be going on. We both know that. But they are in a complete cluster situation where things are really ugly. Mm-hmm. And this is the perfect solution for a company like that. Mm-hmm. They're small, but they're mighty, and they don't have to be in this situation. So I can't wait to bring this solution to them because it's going to be a game changer for them because, let's face it, none of them want to be in that particular situation. For the sports team that I worked with, and they initially had some challenges. They had challenges with listening. They had challenges with being selfish. They had challenges with not playing as a team. And so that can apply to both the workforce and in sports, right, where somebody's being, a ball hog or, taking all the credit for everything that's going on. Nobody likes that.
Correct.
But I think we've done a great job today in terms of really driving home the importance of having this plan in place and that everybody can do it. It's relatively easy to do. The fact that people don't do it is sometimes a mystery to me.
Yeah.
But if somebody at least watching this today were to take one thing away from this, I hope that they'll consider doing this advice and applying this advice that we're
Sure.
giving them today. So I just want to thank you today, Eliot. I think this show went by very quickly. It's a great topic, like some of the others. I think we could talk for ages on it, and we may have to revisit this one again someday.
Right on. That was fun, Murf.
But
Thanks.
thank you very much.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So stay tuned. Next time we'll be back with lots of more topics that will resonate with you and that you can take actions away from them and enjoy keeping your business or your team in a much better place. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching today.